I finally understood something about guidance after 20 years of spiritual practice, and I want to share it with you. 20 years reading books about the path, having direct experience with an authentic spiritual guide, hearing the same analogy over and over. The spiritual journey and the relationship with the spiritual guide is like climbing a mountain with a mountain guide. And I could not really understand it because I had never been on a mountain with a mountain guide. So recently I did.
Up there. Wow.
And here is what I finally understood. Real guidance, whether from a spiritual master or a mountain guide, creates conditions for your transformation while respecting your sovereignty. The transmission is real, the support matters, and you rely on and deepen your self-knowledge throughout. But here's what I want to bring to your attention. Even with a real guide, systems always become limiting. The company was called Extreme Travels, which should have been my first clue. I have a completely torn ACL and zero training for anything extreme. But sometimes the universe gives you the perfect mismatch for you to understand the match. From the very beginning, the mountain guide kept pushing. You can do this. You just don't know yourself for real. That's why you want to pull back. Tomorrow we are going to reach the summit. Yet I knew myself. I knew my body. I had clearly communicated my condition, both with the company and with him. Another woman in the group was also struggling. Mostly lack of training in her case, but she wanted to see if she could keep up with the others. The next day, I followed my own rhythm and told the guy I would be slow. Since he and a third woman were so well trained, I wouldn't mind if they went for the summit together. He listened, and after expressing concern about splitting the group, he recommended to me an easier trail to follow, showed me how to follow it with the help of the map, and then let me go on my own pace. I have learned to be alone through various life situations, and I have come to love it, actually. I was purely happy to explore and reach as far as my body agreed. The sky was clear and beautiful that weekend. There were plenty of other people on the trails. I wasn't worried. Walking higher toward an elevating crossing, I could feel my knee was done walking for that day. I decided to rest before heading back. That's when I ran into the other slow-paced woman who had also eventually decided to follow her rhythm. We continued the journey together. We talked about God. We found some of his mysteries by simply enjoying each step instead of racing to the peak. We got back to the cabin before sunset, and just before that, the guide and the faster and the well-trained woman caught up with us, coming back from the summit they had reached. So we had dinner together. We were all happy to have fully enjoyed our journeys in our own pace. The mountain embraced each of us, just as we were. The next day, me and the other not-so-trained woman were even slower due to muscle pain. So while the guide and the well-trained woman went to conquer another summit, the two of us remained at the cabin. I spent most of the day forest bathing, resting on the green moss by the brook. Ate a lot of good food, and the cabin staff were very friendly and supportive. It wasn't until the very last evening, during dinner, that the guide finally stopped and really looked at me and said, "So you actually do have a serious knee issue?" Yes, I have been saying that since day one. I was happy he finally understood. His role wasn't to get everyone to the same summit. It was to help each person have the journey they actually came for. And he succeeded by giving guidance, adjusting his recommendations, helping us with our backpacks. He was used to his role for an extreme travel and needed some time to figure out his role in this particular situation. And once he did, he committed to it. That is the first thing that matters in real guidance, knowing your role and committing to it. Here is what is important about guidance, whether spiritual or practical. There is real transmission going on, the kind that cannot be faked. And there is a transmission that moves between people like light moves through space. Let me tell you about my spiritual guide, because this matters. There were times when he would simply appear in my dreams, explaining things, having a chat, or just hugging me. Or I would think of him intensely, call for his help or for his assistance, and ask for guidance. And suddenly, somehow, the air seemed to change consistency around me, and I could sense or even see his presence like a radiant light next to me. Though he was miles away, I would later talk to him about this, about the things he advised me, or things he said or I said in these encounters, and the conversation would just continue. There was a transfer between us across distance, what I now understand as quantum entanglement. One of his first gifts to me as a beginner was a mystical state of true love. I could only define it as true love, really. And it wasn't what I thought that love was. And it's also not what I experienced love to be, usually, until that moment. Or even after, with my boyfriends or in other circumstances. He showed me that through that transmission, that true love isn't about longing, attachment, needing someone to make you whole, or to be together and have each other. True love is more like a bubble of clean and still, refreshing yet embracing air, pure air. It is stillness, it is peace. It is a completely unshakable, pure being. And it has nothing to do with whether I am loved back, though being loved back amplifies it. Not being loved back does not diminish it mysteriously. It is a state when the soul can just be. When I sensed the transmission of this state of true love, I knew this was how my spiritual guide loved, and he was simply sharing with me from his experience, remotely. And this is real transmission. Here is what's happening in quantum terms. When someone achieves stable coherence in their consciousness field, they can create what is called entanglement with your field. Like tuning forks, one vibrates at a clear frequency and causes another to resonate at that same frequency, even without touching. The spiritual guide modulates the quantum field around you and within you. He is not giving you something you don't have or you cannot access. He is adjusting the frequencies available so that you can access a state that was always there in the universal field, but you couldn't tune into it alone yet. That is why I could sense his presence across dimensions, distances. That is why the transmission was real. But here is the critical part. It took me years of personal practice to learn to access that state of true love by myself without his help. He created the conditions for me to experience the frequency. And I had to learn, put in my own work to generate that coherence autonomously in circumstances of my choice. What made me trust my spiritual guide was more than the mystical experiences. What made me trust him was simpler and harder. He never took away my choice, even when I made decisions that seemed unwise, even when I was probably ungrateful or completely missing his point. He would look at me and I could feel him seeing my choice, and he would say, I see where you are going with this. I see what you might be missing. It is your path. Walk it. And he meant it. He didn't withdraw. He didn't make his love conditional on my obedience. He didn't punish my questions with silence or disappointment. Actually, he taught me why it's good to be disappointed. That it's actually important and good for everybody to stop making appointments with based on all kind of expectations. Appointments in the sense like you appoint yourself that you're gonna be with this person, or that you're gonna have this job, or that you're gonna do this or that with your life and achieve such and such. It's an appointment with that situation. And then when that doesn't happen, you get disappointed. And he taught me that it's good to reach that state where you are never disappointed by no matter what happens. You are always true to yourself. And while circumstances might not work out the way you expect them to, the way you appointed yourself and them to unfold, you will not be disappointed. You will be still you in a constant aliveness, appointment with your soul. He actually emphasized a lot that I must have hope all the time. And he maintained his frequency whether I tune into it or not. This is how you know someone is actually connected to Source, to God, to the quantum field. Whatever that makes sense to you, however you want to call it, they are so stable in their inner coherence that chaos doesn't shake them. They can hold the space for your learning without needing to control your path or your choices. This is the second principle. Real guidance respects your sovereignty while offering transmission. My spiritual guide respected my choices above all, sovereignty over compliance, while also respecting spiritual principles. Quantum physics doesn't change because you want it to. You can't force coherence. You can't skip integration. These principles don't bend. But within those principles, a real guide adapts. My mountain guide carried my backpack and suggested an easier trail for me, adapting to my conditions, adapting the situations, the conditions of the mountain walk and trip to my actual abilities and conditions. But he didn't change his own course. He still took the trained woman to the summit, even if the group split for that. Flexibility within the unchangeable framework. This is mastery. And here is what else. His reactions were clean. My spiritual guide never punished my questions or hesitations with withdrawal, never made his coherence conditional on my compliance. He stayed stable, regardless of my choices. He didn't wait for me, but when I reached out, he was there. The mountain guide, who finally listened on the last day, didn't get defensive when I repeated my limits. He adjusted without resentment. Real guides manage their own reaction. If it is not for the harmonious transformation of the student, while honoring the fundamental principles, it is just ego taken over. So if you meet a guide who is somehow When you question them, they withdraw, or they suddenly tell you are resisting grace and you should be more accepting and more surrendered. You should really check out that guide or teacher or whatever properly. Here is where it gets a little complicated, and this is what you need to understand if you are seeking guidance. Real transmission is magnetic, and there are those type of people who want that power, and they want it before they complete their actual training, which takes years. So people being in a rush, being a little bit faster than others, they tend to mistake their, well, maybe some natural gifts with actual results from the practice. And I have encountered many of the followers of my spiritual guide who felt entitled to impose control, even in situations in which he would never do that. For example, one of the rules of living in the ashram was to do a 2-hour daily practice, body practice and meditation. And there was a person in charge for checking if you actually did this practice. And if you didn't do it, you would get a really big fine in money. And the idea with this was to teach you the cost in money of neglecting to do something that is good for you, the practice, the spiritual daily practice. So being charged a lot of money, everybody knows when you pay for something, when something is costly financially, you pay attention to that. You will do what you have to do if it costs you. Because 99% of people are slaves to money, unfortunately. So they were using that. Therefore, this strategy worked on most people who are indeed money-driven like that. In my case, though, I discovered I would rather go and do some small croquis kind of job or work in a cafe or something that would get me some money for not too long time, make it so that I could pay those fines. And this was all while I was volunteering. I was a full-time volunteer. Like all my time and energy was going to work for this organization. So on top of that, I would get small jobs to pay the fines they would give me. But to me, what that meant was a better solution than to let them control me somehow. I didn't want them to turn me into a spiritual puppet. It was also unfortunate for me to see that the person in charge pretty soon discovered that the money that were made from the fines was a pretty good source of extra money. So she used that a little bit more than necessary. In the long run, this strategy, together with other such tactics, led to me distancing myself almost completely from this organization. And not because the teachings were not valid, they are actually by far, they are highly authentic teachings, but because the people who were in charge misused them in their actions. They created standards of worthiness, hierarchies of achievement, developed certain behavior patterns that were leading more and more towards dogma, which is the case with many similar systems. Anyhow, they mistook their spiritual ego for spirit itself. Pride and self-importance sneak in gradually until you can't tell the difference. And suddenly you are in a system that uses real transmission to create dependency, not sovereignty. So yes, both can be true at once. The system can be limiting, while the guide is authentic. This is why discernment matters. You need to ask, is this the guide's teaching or the organization's interpretation? Is this a spiritual principle or someone's ego dressed in spiritual language? There is a wise saying in Romanian, do what the priest says, not what the priest does. And that means listen to the actual teachings, practice the actual teachings. Trust your own results over what others tell you. Real transmission is nourishing for your soul. Trust it when you feel the warmth, the expanded inner states, the aha moments, which always takes you further, deeper into your own practice. Focus on becoming better than the you from yesterday. Don't copy others, don't compare yourself with others because you think they are better or they are more advanced or they have been doing this for so long, so they must know better than you. Just live your own life. Real transmission is more about you learning how to transmit, getting your own ego out of your own way. Real guidance doesn't demand dependency. It teaches you how to tune your receiver. And this brings us to the third essential truth. The goal of real guidance is your autonomy, not your dependency. My spiritual guide always pointed toward accessing that state of true love autonomously, to do the practice with a correct attitude that would eventually open my heart to such love. My mountain guide created conditions where I could walk my own rhythm safely. The group split was not a failure. It was perfect for that situation. The ultimate goal isn't a devoted follower. That is a stage. Yes, it is. The ultimate goal is a sovereign being who learn to tune themselves to God, navigate their own terrain, walk their own rhythm, and inspire others tune into God as well. Even if we choose not to use the guidance to its full potential, as long as we grow from who we were and where we were when we met our guide to who we become through their presence, as long as that growth implies autonomy and dignity, we succeeded. Real guidance creates conditions and states, whether that's modulating quantum fields to help you access new frequencies of consciousness, or carrying your backpack so you can walk your actual pace on a mountain. The mechanism is different, but the principle is the same. The guide knows the terrain. You know yourself. And the point isn't to make you like them. It is to help you become more fully you, your true divine essence. My spiritual guide gave me access to states I couldn't reach alone initially, then trusted me to learn to generate that coherence myself by taking the time to practice, a lot of time, but it did work. My mountain guide showed me that racing to the summit isn't required for a mystical experience. The mountain, like spiritual life, like life generally, is just as magical and embracing as long as you dare to walk it at your own pace. Both taught me real guidance respects sovereignty while offering transmission. The state transfer. The support is essential, and you need your self-knowledge throughout. You communicate your truth. You walk your rhythm. You choose how you walk the path. And remember, even with a real guide, systems inevitably become limiting. Trust the teaching, do the practice. Trust your own results.